What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, we are back off from another international break, and some mixed feelings, I would say. Unfortunately, we are not in this episode to celebrate Paraguay's qualification. We have to wait another couple months for that, unfortunately, because of the results that we had. But at least we could talk about some positives and something to improve, because eventually, like Ralph had said beforehand in our preview episode, the streak needed to end somehow, and it did. Gustavo Alfaro's team has finally been beaten after 10 games, 9 wins, 1 loss, and we're going to talk about those games between Uruguay and Brazil in a bit. And also, we have the Club World Cup happening. You know, you would think that after a long break, after a long season that we've had watching these Paraguayan players in Europe or abroad, or even starting their seasons, that we have a competition right in front of it. We have 6 Paraguayans participating. We'll talk about them in a bit, the expectations, because I think there's differentiating expectations for all these players. And then yeah, unfortunately, like I said to you, Fede, it's sad that we can't celebrate Paraguay's win. I'm sure everyone was really happy, was really prepared to see Paraguay qualify for the World Cup because results were going our way on Tuesday evening against Brazil, but it was not to be. But we still get to talk about it. We get to hold off the champagne, like they always say. Fine wine is better when it's aged. So, hopefully in September, that wine that we could celebrate can be very fresh and very nice to use when they do qualify to the World Cup. Because I think we are there. I think we'll say that we are going to the World Cup. It's a question about what position we're in, how we'll do it, and whatnot. But I think we're there. It's just a matter of the mathematical evaluations to go to. But Fede, I'll go to you first because it has been a wild week in Paraguay, I guess, since that win against Uruguay and then, of course, the loss against Brazil. It feels like that we get the highs of being on this wave, but then we get crashing. We go crashing down back to earth. But in a sense, it kind of feels like meh. We're not that pichado, as we say in Spanish. We're not that bothered by it, I would say. I don't know how you feel, but that's how I personally feel about it.
Hi, Roberto. Hi, Rob. It's great to be back, guys, for another one. All three of us here to talk about what happened in these last 2 games for a Paraguayan the team, the national team that had 2 very important games, we must say. But particularly, I'm better than ever. I feel like the revenge tour, this operation of let's go back to the World Cup is almost complete, guys. And that's the way I feel it, right? After getting that win against Uruguay, I thought that was the big battle out of the two that we had in this combo. So I'm enjoying it like never before. I'm in this amazing moment with our national team. I'm gonna take the best out of it. Seeing the fans, the way they lived it these last couple of weeks. The chemistry between the staff and the players, the way the players are also involved in all of this, the way they're absorbing the whole situation. I'm loving it, really. The whole trip to the World Cup. Every time we have beaten Uruguay also in the World Cup qualifiers. We've always went to a World Cup, so I feel like we're already there. Just like you said, Roberto. I mean, from the math point of it. Maybe we still need a point or something, but we already feel like we're there, and I think there's been so much accomplishment already with putting the fans by your side. I mean, you just talked about that game against Brazil and the atmosphere before that game. It was already World Cup atmosphere here in Paraguay. I mean, you had the kids already with the shirt on. Everybody was so proud of this team. And obviously, we'll talk about both games, but we'll get this done in September. Just stock up your champagne, stock up your stuff because your fireworks. Because I think we saw the best and still the flaws of this team in both games. When you go up against strong teams, World Cup caliber teams like Brazil, that they've done it so many times, they've been world champions. It's not an easy game. We've never beaten them over there in Brazil, so it was something maybe to even expect, just like Raf and I predicted it before. But the winning streak is over for Paraguay. We're closer than ever to the World Cup. That's the way I feel about it, and Brazil's not gonna take that away from me. They barely got a goal on us. They had to get the best coach in the world to do something against us. So I'm taking the best out of this combo. Overall, it was really good to see Paraguay the way they played it in both matches.
Yeah, Rob, it's like that. We needed Brazil to be Brazil again because it would have felt weird. It's like, wait a minute, come on, we gotta let them go back and give them a chance to actually win a game. Because think about it, we won more games more than they have. So I think it's sort of that feeling. But yeah, I agree with Fede. It's the sense that the game against Uruguay was the game to win, and that kind of the Brazil game was sort of a formality. And I think these next two games with Ecuador coming up at home, a team that we've never lost to ever in World Cup qualifying, and then Peru, who are basically out of it. And even if you don't go into those results, you could depend on other results like Venezuela. I think they have to hope to beat Argentina, which I don't see that happening. So in essence, worst case scenario, Paraguay are through the World Cup, even if they don't even get another point in these next two games. I mean, it'd be nice to obviously close out the qualifying campaign with a win and whatnot. It would have been nice also to qualify on Tuesday, but wasn't meant to be. So hopefully Paraguay will do it at their home ground at the Defensores in September. But yeah, I think I agree with sort of what Fede had to say. Like there might be some sort of debate, and we'll obviously talk about it with the Brazil game coming up, but I think there are more positives that you can take from these two games, which again, it was a difficult combo to begin with. So, it was a really difficult two games with Uruguay also trying to go for the World Cup spot as well. So, for them to come off with the win that they did at home and to lose to Brazil, which no one has ever done it besides Argentina, and it's always notoriously difficult to get a win or a result there anyway. I think you can feel positive that in a way, this sort of loss that we got will be a blessing in disguise, especially for Alfaro, who I think, needed to go back to earth because after 9 games, eventually someone there had to lose somehow.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Roberto, Fede, everybody watching and listening. Yeah, I think it's a positive combo on balance. I mean, the real important thing was to beat Uruguay and get back to beating Uruguay because similar to you mentioned Ecuador, the Paraguay's always beaten them at home. They used to be our record against Uruguay until a certain Luis Suarez turned up, and around that generation we started slipping up, and I think we lost for the first time in the 2018 qualifiers, and then we lost since then. So that was I think an important moment to also show that it was a team that Alfaro hadn't beaten, because in the first game we drew, of course, 0-0 in Montevideo. And so getting that result really set things up. And it's true that Brazil, everybody was like thinking, could we do the impossible? Because I know people are already out in the streets there watching that game in Asuncion on the streets. A lot of the municipality had like closed down a lot of the roads, so just in case the party was going to happen, and we did do the impossible. It wasn't to be, but I think you can see the whole country is behind this team, is looking forward to the World Cup, like you say, Roberto. I mean, it's basically done. We've been in this a long time to not say anything's done until it's done, but I think the probabilities I saw the other day were like 99.5%. So I mean, we're almost very there. You can pretty much touch it, right? So I think it's looking good. It was really interesting, and I guess we'll talk about this more, is Paraguay played a very similar game in both matches and got very different results in terms of they had about 29% possession. They were really just trying to restrict the team outside of the penalty area, and in that way that Alfaro has been doing, and then pick them off. It worked against Uruguay, didn't against Brazil, which we'll talk about. But I think it's really interesting that we've definitely got this style down, but will we be able to adapt that when we get into the World Cup? And the games could be very different. So we've already got to start thinking ahead now to next year and those possible rivalries that Paraguay is going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly these sort of results build up some resistance. And, obviously, the same team that we have now might not be the same team that we have 364 days, 365 days from now, because the World Cup obviously starts in less than a year. So a lot can change in this team as well. But I think what matters is that you create a sort of an identity. And, we'll talk about the Uruguay game right now. Obviously it was, like you said, Fede, and, I had the fortune of being there, but it was really a party. It really did feel like something special was going to happen. And really, this sort of winning streak that had been going on overall, especially at home, the fact that that Alfaro, now, of course, we could say, hasn't lost a single game at home since he took charge. And so I think people were expecting the same as well. And, looking at the lineups that were going on, you had a really the best team that you could have, I think, in terms of strong lineups and whatnot. We got Tito in goal, Cáceres, Alderete, Gomez, and Alonso in defense, Diego Gomez, Cubas, and Matias Galarza in midfield, and then Enciso, Almiron, and Sanario rounding off that front three. So, you felt like that was going to be sort of the team by memory, as we say there. Because you think about it, Alfaro, even in these 10 games, he's only used 27 different players. So he's still like that. That's to say, so like, yeah, we're keeping this base of players and it's not going to be unchanged unless something happens, like an injury or a suspension. We'll talk about the Brazil game in a second. But, Fede, overall, I think Paraguay played the game that they wanted. And, like Ralph had said, yeah, obviously possession was very low, 29% on the day, but 12 shots, 5 on target. But you really saw a Paraguay team that was really going for it. Matias Galarza scoring the goal, his first ever goal in Paraguay, is a really nice little cross from Enciso. And then obviously Galarza wins the second ball to get the header. And then obviously in the second half, it was Enciso. Who became the star of the show with his penalty. He won the ball after a mistake from Araujo to get the penalty, and then he scores with his famous little celebration, of course. And I think it certainly made him the idol of a lot of Paraguayans out there. But overall, that was the performance that Paraguay needed, and of course, the big one. They scored 2 goals. We've been used to seeing them and win by 2 goals, I should say. We've been seeing them win by 1 goal, really gritty games so far. But the fact that they were able to score twice and be very convincing. And it could have been more, honestly. It could have been more, which, for a team like we do it against Uruguay, which are very, really tight games to begin with, the fact that Paraguay really could have scored more if they needed to, I think showed that they really are putting in that offensive game that Alfaro is trying to put in over there, and hopefully for the rest of the qualifiers.
Yeah, we were able to score 2. We were able to keep a clean sheet, which was something that was, something that was in everybody's head also lately because of our goalkeeper situation. So it was good moving forward that we had that clean sheet and we had our best team. That's the feeling that I had in the preview, right? I mean, with only one doubt, maybe in that midfield, if it was going to be Matias Galarza or another midfielder coming in. There was rumors that it could be Damian Bobadilla, but he had gone through a whole situation right before this game. So it was up to Matias Galarza, right, to step up and to be that fourth wheel that you need in that midfield with Almirón, with Cubas, and Diego Gomez. I think this is the best team. It's the strongest team I've seen in the Alfaro era with Alderete already winning over in defense a long time ago, his spot. There's no doubts about the size and defense. I mean, that line of the back four comes out of memory. And there is that one spot open still in that midfield, but Galarza, I mean, he's just chipping in so much. He's being that complete midfielder lately, that putting that aggressiveness, coming up in the box, also scoring. And when you're doing everything, I mean, they can't take you out of the team, right? And he's really been that way. They can't take him out right now. What he's bringing to the team is even more of what I was expecting from him, to be honest with you guys. I mean, ever since he's put on that Paraguayan jersey, he's just looked like a player that's ready for it, and a player that has always played for this team, and it hasn't been that way. I mean, even though, yeah, he played in the youth national teams also, maybe that gives him some sort of experience, but the Matias Galarza that I'm seeing has really surprised me. But it wasn't just about the game. I thought Paraguay was a much better team. I thought Uruguay really missed Valverde in the midfield. They really missed their best players out there, and it was a matter of who had a better team, and we had the better team. Even in the chemistry, like I said, between the fans and the players, the staff and the players, and you did not see that from the Uruguayan point of it, because you saw Bielsa the whole game just sitting there, pretty much not talking to his players. And that was something that was talked about before this game, the whole situation in the locker room for the Uruguayans. And I kind of felt that it went against them also in this game, where you needed everything to come together, and it all came together for us. Because home games have not only been about football matches lately, just like you said, Roberto. You've been in some of these games lately, and you felt that atmosphere, and it's really been a party, a family environment, Paraguayan culture, all coming together. They're putting shows, music, and I want to stand this out because for many years this is something that was probably missing. The show side of it in the Paraguayan stadiums, in the national team games. So this props to the FA, who has finally taking a step forward, looking at these games like a chance to put up a show for the public and for everybody that's watching it. So you had a concert, again, the whole choreography in the stands, with the Lion coming back also, that brings me a lot of memories from the World Cup back in 2010. So everybody was just so, emotional before the game. So that goes up to the players also. I'm pretty sure, they felt this thing, the whole Guarani culture, the Paraguayan spirit, the Guarani garra that we're always talking about here, also in this podcast. And you felt that the players from the first play, from the first minute, they went out there and they wanted to get the result. And I saw that attitude. I saw that will to win it from the first time they touched the ball. So I'm really happy about this win. Just like Ralph said, we beat Uruguay after 18 years. It's special to beat a team that was beating us up not long ago when they had Suarez, when they had Cavani at their top level, and now it's our turn. I lived it. I was in that final Copa America in Buenos Aires back in 2011 when they beat us. They stomped on us when we thought we had a chance. I was at that 4-0 in Montevideo back in 2016 when Suarez and Cavani were at their best. So it's our time to shine. We have the best players right now, and I believe that we showed it. I think we showed that we're a much better team, and it was another masterclass from the Mr. himself, from Mr. Alfaro, who picked the right boys to get it done at home. So I'm really happy about this one, Ralph.
Yeah, and just picking up on what you're saying about the atmosphere, it starts even before the stadium. So when the bus was going through Asuncion, and they always take them through Mercado Cuatro, which is like this big kind of marketplace, and it's very tight because everything's spilling out into the street. And you saw all the people there, like with the flags and the smoke bombs and everything. And when I didn't realize it at the time, but when you look back when the national team posts stuff on social media, you can see actually the players on the bus are filming it. They're like, whoa, this is pretty cool themselves. So I think the whole build up towards the game was there. And then you get to the stadium, it's like a crescendo. And like you said, by the time the game kicks off, the game's half won because you're at home and you've got that feeling. This is also something to remember as well, that this Paraguay team now are in a place where they're confident enough to use that pressure to their advantage. Because remember, Paraguay were a home win against Venezuela from qualifying for Russia 2018. It was just there for them to win. It was easy, right? And they couldn't under pressure. And now I think we've seen this total kind of change in mentality whereby they like the pressure, they're using it to their advantage. And it's becoming what we see, these really vibrant performances at home, even though they don't have much of the ball. We said it's only about 29% possession, but when they do have the ball, they're so good. And it's the work off it with people like Matias Galarza that really make a difference. But the player I wanted to point out from this game in particular was Miguel Almiron, because he had another great game for Paraguay, and he's doing, I mean, he ended up having, I think he had the most interceptions on our team. He had the most key passes going forward, and I'm pretty sure he either won the most duels or he had something again. Yeah, I think he won the most duels. So it's like defensively off the ball, but on the ball he was doing everything. And they've created this great partnership between Almiron, Sanabria, and Enciso, which we see in the first goal, right? So I think it's Almiron finds Almiron finds Sanabria, he gets the ball back, he plays it to Enciso, Enciso's cross is just diverted, but then it goes to Matias Galarza at the back post. So what Galarza is doing really well is he can work off the ball, but he's athletic enough to be in the box, and so he heads in. So that you can see all of these things starting to come together. And remember, it's not long ago on this very podcast, we're talking about Enciso and Almiron having a fight when they're playing for Newcastle and Brighton. And in the Copa America, they did not like each other. I mean, you could see that on the pitch. They were not getting on. And so now to see these two, actually when Enciso scores the penalty, right, the first player to jump on his back is Almiron again. So this is all working so well together. And going now from Almiron to Enciso, what Enciso needs is Almiron. I think for Enciso to be effective and to have the free role he has, and he can do what he wants, and you have to let him do, we talked about this before, right? You have to let him do what he wants for him to be effective. That's the whole kind of Enciso style. But then you need other players to back you up, and Almiron's doing so much of that work as more as a forward than a midfielder, but he's working back to cover those spaces, I suppose, that will eventually be left when someone like Enciso is having a free role. So it's all, I think, clicking together really well. And in his press conference, Bielsa said Paraguay came with a style they wanted to play and they played it, whereas we came with a style we wanted to play and we couldn't play it because Paraguay didn't allow that. So I think it worked out perfectly, and once again Alfaro kind of played his cards perfectly for the game.
Yeah, and I think as well, just going into this game further, I think there was so much hype and there's so much feeling that you felt like this team needed some sort of resistance, I would say. And I think we'll talk about that in Brazil, but you kind of felt like eventually this couldn't be too good. Like there had to be something to fall back us back to earth.
I thought it was huge to score right away, to get that first goal in those first minutes, just to get that pressure off of you and throw the towel at Uruguay because they needed the points also. I mean, they're in a tight situation and they knew that they needed to get something out of this game. So I thought, to get that pressure off quickly and to have that aggressiveness from the first minute, I thought that was the big thing for me because overall I saw a team that was kind of tired, especially in the second half. And that's something that we're going to talk about probably more in the second game against Brazil. And that's probably what I didn't like so much in this game. We saw the second unit come in a bit late, right? Those last 10 minutes, I thought they could have come in a little bit earlier because they showed really good stuff out there. I'm talking about Kaku Gamarra with Angel Romero. Maybe not Avalos. He didn't do much in these two games, but I really like what I saw from these two players in particular. I thought they could have played more minutes and give some rest to certain players that are really tired after a long season in the European calendar. I'm talking about Diego Gomez. I'm talking about Julio Ciso. Tony Sanabria can't play 90 minutes. So you got a couple of subs that you're already planning on doing. So that's why these guys play the way they do also. They leave everything out there because they know that they're not going to be out there the whole game. And we're obviously going to talk more and more about the good stuff, but there were a couple of things that I didn't really like. I didn't see the best Diego Gomez in these two games. I don't know if he was kind of banged up. He came after scoring his first game in the Premier League, so there was a lot of hype around him and his current status. But then you heard Alfaro saying, "No, he's really tired. He's been playing so much. He'd have a preseason in his new club. His life has been flipped around so much lately. So, his head has been all over the place and he didn't look like his best self. And we need that best Diego Gomez to be that complete midfield, just like Ralph was saying. So Miguel Miron doesn't have to do everything, right? That's why I was standing out also what Matias Galarza has brought, because I kind of think he put in his shoulders a lot of things that Diego Gomez, I believe, was needed to contribute in a game like this against Uruguay. But I think now we're in the problem where we're thinking, okay, who's going to come in and solve these last minutes, or who's going to come in and give some rest to the stars of the team? That's what we're doing right now, Roberto. I'm really feeling good about this team. It's just a matter of, being able to play every 3 days and being able to play at the same level. That's something that we still need to work on.
Absolutely. And, we'll go into that game against Brazil right now because obviously there was really a lot of attention given to that. One, it was obviously Carlo Ancelotti's first game in charge. He had come in at home. He was coming off a 0-0 draw against Ecuador in Guayaquil. So obviously the pressure was more on them than on us. But it was going to be difficult to begin with. And you saw that even in the first few minutes. Obviously Brazil had a lot of chances. Vinicius missed one in the first, I think it was the first 20 minutes, something like that. Gatito had to come in to sort of save. But eventually, it was a little lapse of an error, really, from Junior Alonso. It was a back pass that allowed Matias Cunha to cross the ball in and allow Vinicius to score the only goal of the game. But it could have been more of it, Ralph. It really could have been more because I think you saw, like you said, I think you saw Diego Gomez that like probably was tired, wasn't performing to the level that he should have. I think it was a very much a jittery game, I would say, because I didn't think Paraguay played that bad in comparison to what maybe other people think. Obviously taking to the game to Brazil and losing 1-0, which, most teams go to Brazil and you usually get smashed maybe 2-3-0 or, sometimes, eventually lose. But I think that was kind of the game that you were expecting, especially from a Carlo Ancelotti led side, that it took control of the game early on and then just allow them to sort of not feel as if they could take advantage. And I think that's what you saw in Gustavo Alfaro's first loss of his tenure here.
Yeah, I think the warning signs there within 5 minutes when Junior Alonso gets booked, right? So he gets booked really early on, and what you realized that Ancelotti is doing, which is totally different to what say Bielsa did with Uruguay, is how am I going to combat the way Paraguay want to play? I'm going to keep the wingers really high, which he used to do at Real Madrid. I mean, it's not really a secret. So I mean, he had Rafinha one side and Martinelli the other side, staying really high and wide. And I thought in this game, you saw the kind of the two fullbacks. You had Juan Cáceres on one side and Junior Alonso on the other. And Juan Cáceres had a much better game, in my opinion, than Alonso. And what does Cáceres do? He doesn't get dragged out because there's a temptation to be dragged out wide, and then you're suddenly exposed in those one-on-ones. And that's what happens to Alonso in that very first play in those 5 minutes where he gets booked. He's kind of drifted away from his box to try and close down, and these players are too quick, too skillful in that one-on-one situation. And so that was really, I think, the warning sign, and Paraguay never quite dealt with it. Also because maybe in these situations there's so much work to do for people like Diego Gomez, and in this case Villasanti, who had to come in for Galarza because Galarza was suspended. They almost have to be helping double up their fullbacks, but they also have to be trying to win the duels against someone like Bruno Guimaraes. And it was just too much, I think, for Paraguay to manage. And if you look at the game compared to Uruguay, like just where Paraguay were trying to win the ball compared to against Uruguay, they just weren't able to, because I think the Guimaraes and Casemiro have much better control of the match. And then they weren't able to bring the line up to try and even steal, like the goal where the penalty, sorry, against Uruguay, when Enciso's stealing the ball off Araujo. They just didn't have the chance to do that kind of thing because Brazil were much better, I think, at keeping those wingers high and really not allowing Paraguay to play the game they kind of wanted to play. So it was, I mean, those games look really bad for you when you lose them if you're playing with hardly any possession. But that's why I wanted to point out it was very similar to Uruguay in terms of possession stats. But obviously the game looks much worse when you end up losing 1-0 and don't create a huge amount. I'm trying to think. I mean, I remember one kind of long shot that Alisson saves quite comfortably. But really, I mean, you didn't think Paraguay, unless it was a set piece, we're really going to get back in there. So I mean, it's one of those games. I think you'll take it. You'll take it from only losing 1-0 to Brazil. It is a shame that Paraguay have now gone 3 games in Brazil without scoring for the first time in their history. So they do usually like at least make Brazil sweat a little bit. Although I was looking before the game, I think Paraguay have only even taken the lead in Brazil once in I think it was when Cavani
Yeah,
scored.
the '09 game, it was the 2-1
Yeah.
loss. Cavani took the lead. I think it was from a free kick actually, and
Yeah.
Brazil ended up winning 2-1.
They did, yeah. So that's the only time I think Paraguay have ever even been leading in Brazil. So I mean, it's like we were talking about before. It's not an easy place to go. Whether Brazil are bad or not, that's that's also another question. Because again, you looked at that team and you thought this is a pretty good side when you on paper, and then you look at the manager, Carlo Ancelotti. I mean, it's not an easy task. So I think what Paraguay tried to do, I think their game plan almost made sense, but they just didn't quite have the individual capacity to pull it off. And especially I think that difference between how Cáceres played the game to how Junior Alonso played the game. This is not to like, point out just Alonso. It's just looking at the way you can better defend it is the way Cáceres did it. If you look at, by the way, Cáceres, he ended up in the box so much, but that was actually probably a better way to end up playing this game than getting yourself dragged out like Alonso did.
Yeah, I don't think Brazil did anything extraordinary in this game. I thought that, they looked for their plays, but they had the ball way more than us. And the team looked really tired to do that high pressure that they did against Uruguay. So the setup was pretty much in midfield or really close to our box. So I did not like that because you had an offensive team from the players' point of it. If you analyze player by player, you had more players to attack and to defend. But the setup in the field, I mean, Brazil threw you to your box. I mean, because they had the ball, and that was something that Alfaro mentioned after the first game against Uruguay. Yeah, I like the 2-0, but we should have had the ball a lot more. We should have had more possession. This is something that we need to work on. We need to have the ball more so we can be the team that can propose the football out there. And this wasn't the game for it because Brazil put us on a tight situation with such an attacking team, with so many fast players. Martinelli was just another one out there. And it was all about, the speed of the ball, the speed of the pitch. It was really hard for our players from that point of it. And I thought the players really had a hard time handling the ball. To really connect with each other, and then you had the game. Most of the time, you had the team defending, so when you had to attack, you really had no legs for it. And then the players that came in the second half didn't really make the difference. Avalos again, he couldn't put up a ball in the attack, and that's what you needed out of him in these kind of games. Just throw it out there, hold it a couple of seconds, let the team rest a bit with the ball, and we never had that situation during the game. I thought Brazil at a certain point were really close to a second or a third goal even because they were really outbeating us, especially in the beginning of the second half. But to be honest with you guys, if the game would have gone to the halftime 0-0, I was thinking, the atmosphere in that second half, it's going to be totally different because, Brazil was starting to feel the pressure because they needed a goal. They needed to win somehow. This first game for Ancelotti, this game at home. I mean, before the game, there was a lot of pressure on the Brazilian players. And up until Vinicius scored, I really saw, Brazilian players, they weren't comfortable out there, and you could see that they still are not finding their football. But that's their problem. From what I saw from our team, the fatigue. This team really looked tired, and I think Alfaro needs to learn his lesson from all of this, and hopefully for the upcoming games and when we play against really hard teams or prepared teams like these, and teams that are going to attack you the whole game, you need to be much better on the counter attack. You need to be much more effective, and I think that's a lesson to learn from this game in particular. But it wasn't meant to be, Roberto. Just like you said, we gotta wait until September, 3 more months.
Wake me up till September ends, as they say here. Yeah, I think it's certainly going to be an interesting one. And hey, it's better to qualify with your home people, not like Ecuador, we just qualified away from home. But yeah, I think it's also nice. I think because in a way, like Ralph had said, like the odds are really in favor of us. Like you said, 99%, and something really bad has to happen. And just to tell you how bad this Paraguay needs to go. I mean, they have to make, or not bad, but this is the situation that they're in. They have to make 1 point out of 6 for the next 2 games against a Ecuador side that have already qualified and that we've never lost to ever. And against a Peru side, which we've never been able to beat them, but it's also one of the worst Peru sides in recent memory. Or depending on the timing, of course, because Paraguay could even qualify without even playing their game, that Venezuela tie or lose one of their 2 games, either away to Argentina, formality it looks like, or at home to Colombia. So it really is there, Ralph, honestly. Like Paraguay could qualify for the World Cup without, we'll have to wait on the times, of course, and the dates, but it could be a scenario where Paraguay have already qualified for the World Cup and they don't even need to depend on themselves.
Yeah, it would be quite the story if Venezuela went to Argentina and won, and Paraguay lost at home to Ecuador. I mean, nothing's impossible in football, but yeah, we'd be very surprised. So it is looking more and more the Paraguay going to the World Cup, and so then to Fede's point about playing a game every 3 days, it's not just going to be 2 games; it's going to be three for the groups and then the knockouts. I mean, it's there. That's where we really have to see how is this team going to work and how they're going to be able to do it. And that would be really interesting. They've confirmed this week the friendlies for October because after the September 2 games, there's nothing until the World Cup in competitively. So they've got the games in Japan against Japan and I'm assuming in Korea against South Korea, but they haven't confirmed the exact location yet. And so then we're seeing more again, this idea of the 2 matches. I wonder what they're going to do for next year in the warm-up friendlies as well. Are they going to look for some more difficult opposition in terms of European opposition. We've seen in the past in World Cup years that Paraguay go to Austria, they go to Switzerland, and they try and get some friendlies over there. But that will really, I think that will really determine how Alfaro is looking at this, and maybe get them to play some very physical games and really try and get them built up for that. What's going to be the World Cup scenario, which, like we're saying, it's going to happen. I mean, well, you can never say 100%, but I think it's more there than not, right? With 99%. So it's really now looking about how do you build this team and not do what Alfaro did, by the way, with Ecuador, right? And crash out in the group stage where maybe he didn't manage that situation as best he could.
That's very interesting, actually, Rob, because I do think that's that's the next twist that I think you need to give to this whole situation. But that's moving forward. That's thinking about the World Cup. You're gonna have enough friendlies, I believe, to prepare. You're gonna have friendlies to maybe try out a new goalkeeper, maybe try out a new midfielder, maybe try out a new center forward, something like that. Because the group, you already have it. I mean, the base of players is already there. The starting 11 also, because we've seen it in these last couple of games. I mean, he's been using pretty much the same 11, just one at the most, two subs, but the team is already there. So he really needs to work just on the small details and just to have everybody fit. So moving forward, what I think is going to be crucial in this whole situation is, I'm talking about the players and their signings. What are they going to do now? Are they going to Europe? Are they going to stay in their teams? Are stars going to be moved around again? Because you got rumors of Julio Enciso. You got rumors going around with Tony Sanabria situation also. So there's a lot of players right now that you don't know what's going to happen to them in the near future. That's, I believe, the big question going forward.
Yeah, no, it's gonna totally really be an interesting summer. I would say European summer, a Paraguayan winter, of course, because obviously a lot of players could make some decent moves depending on what happens. I think, yeah, all eyes are really gonna be on Julio Enciso in terms of what his future is gonna be. If he's gonna stay at Brighton, if he's gonna move to a different team in the Premier League, if he's gonna just move out of England as a whole? Because obviously said there's rumors of him with Porto, Inter as well. Been interested. I don't know if you guys have been seeing that. That's also been an interesting rumor, but aside from all this, and I'll go to Ralph on this one first. What do you want to see? Because obviously, with this loss, that means that hey, a team is not perfect and you need to improve. What do you feel like heading into September with these last two games coming up? Assuming everyone's fit, or if there's some players that you feel like, what, maybe they just haven't demonstrated it. I know we've always been on the case of what's his name, Gatito. He played those two games, and I'm sure after this game, not everyone, but there's gonna be sort of a case of like, okay, maybe if this was Gil or Coronel, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I don't know. That's just my way of thinking. But is there something that you feel they should improve on heading into these the final two games of the qualifiers?
I think I think there's not a huge amount that you want them to try and change at this point. So improve on, I understand, but you don't want to try and change things too much. It is going to be this back four. It is going to be often with Cubas as a holding midfielder, and then this kind of very mobile line in front of him in terms of the three that kind of do a lot of the shuttling and running. What do I really want to see? I mean, I don't know. It's too soon for Diego Leon, because let's not forget Diego Leon's going to be a Manchester United player, and left back is something we've just been talking about. But I don't think he would be ready within a year from what we've seen so far. It would be a huge step. So I don't think we want to really change too much. It's maybe just finding a good replacement for Sanabria, because I don't think Avalos has been given us what we want, and I don't think we've. I mean, maybe it was Isidro Pita. I was surprised. He's been getting some goals with Bragantino. Maybe it's the Alex Arce if he finally moves on from Liga de Quito and gets into a slightly bigger team. So is more looking at those backup players that could help, and you have to think about how will you cover if Cubas is not there, because we didn't mention him much so far in this podcast, but I mean he's just such a key player to everything, and he's the kind of player, the way he plays, he's could get suspended for games. So you have to consider that. But what happens if he was just injured? I mean, Villasanti's not really going to be the right person. If it was Villasanti, he needs to play with somebody else, and then so you have to take out like Gomez or Galarza. So that's maybe what Paraguay you would have to think about. Is there someone somewhere that we're not thinking about that could be there? But we're all talking about backup players here. I think the starting 11 is we're pretty happy with what we've got.
Yeah, I'm with Ralph on this one. It's all about the backup players, and they're the ones that need to step up, maybe make a big move on their career, take advantage of this situation. Because when the national team is doing well, you got the exposure there. Everybody's looking at you, so you can make a really good sell with a lot of these players. I'm really looking forward to what the agents are going to do with a lot of these players moving into the World Cup year, because we're already there, guys. Just like Roberto mentioned at the beginning of the year, it's less than a year away. So players have to make the right moves to places and clubs where they're going to be important, where they're going to have enough minutes and stay healthy. I think that's huge, because as of right now, we have the starting team, we have the starting 11. This is something that I've waited for so long at the beginning of the qualifiers. Let's not forget about that. How many of these players were injured and not available? A lot of them. Ramon Sosa, Julio Ciso. Now we have them all. We have them all coming together, playing together, and you're seeing what this team is capable of. I want to see it in the World Cup, and with hopefully everybody healthy this way in just about a year from now.
Absolutely. And certainly the way that we're going to see it, because we have we'll shift gears now to the Club World Cup, because we have some Paraguayans that are being playing there. It feels like most of these players are in consideration for their kind of the Paraguay national team, or at least they're in the sort of the setup. We have obviously Gustavo Gomez of Palmeiras. We have Matias Rojas of River Plate, Ruben Escano of Fluminense, Matias Segovia of Alin with Caco Romero of Alin, and David Martinez of Inter Miami. So a couple players that are in that sort of Paraguayan, that sort of national team setup. And yeah, I don't know what to expect from this Club World Cup. This is a weird one. It's happening here, obviously in America, so we'll get the chance to see some of the Paraguayans play there. I know, Fede, and I'll go to you first, that it's probably going to be more important on the South Americans than they are mainly for the Europeans, or at least of the high tier Europeans. And I think looking at some of these games that could indeed happen for some of these Paraguayan players. I mean, let's go to the groups real quick. So you have Palmeiras' group, they're in with Porto, Ali, and Inter Miami. So it could be Lionel Messi having to be marked by Gustavo Gomez in Group A, or David Martinez having to be part of that as well. You obviously have to go to Group E. Let's see if Matias Rojas can be in that group with Urawa Red Diamonds, Monterrey, and Inter Milan. In Group F, Fluminense, Borussia Dortmund, Ulsan Hyundai, and Mamelodi Sundowns of South Africa. And then, of course, you have obviously Al Ain with Segovia and Caco Romero. They get two heavyweights in this group. With obviously Wydad Casablanca of Morocco, but they get Man City and Juventus. So for maybe someone like Caco Romero, it's a really good audition for sort of what he's going to expect. Because if he's going to be sort of a player that's going to be consistent on Alfaro's team, maybe he has to know what it's like playing against the best players in the world, like in City and at Juventus.
He hasn't had that experience, right? Because ever since we saw him leave South America, he's always played in Al Ain. I mean, I think this is something. It's going to be something new for him, obviously, to be able to show his stuff against European teams like Juventus, Manchester City. Talk about huge clubs and the exposure that he's going to have. And he's a vital player. I mean, in every free kick that they have, he's always stepping up. He's always scoring on this team. I think he's one of the stars of Al Ain. I think they consider him that way. So I'm going to be rooting for Al Ain, to be honest with you guys, because Kaku is one of the players that I enjoy the most. And in a group like this one, and just seeing, the rest of the list, the rest of the names that you threw out there. I mean, yeah, we have Gustavo Gomez, who is a huge captain, obviously, in Palmeiras. He's been there for so long. But for me, I think Al Ain, the team to follow, because of Kaku and the role that he has on that team. Besides what could happen also with Ruben Lescano and Fluminense, hopefully he starts getting more minutes. He's also been usually called up lately in the national team. People haven't seen him play yet because Alfaro is yet to put him on, but Ruben Lescano, maybe this is a name to look out for in the near future. When we saw him at the beginning of the year in the local league, he was really making the difference, and he's kind of gone through the whole period of adapting to the new football, to a new league, to a new club, the whole language barrier also, and hopefully in this second semester we start seeing Ruben Lescano having more minutes. Why not be this cup? The opportunity for him in Fluminense to pick up his stuff and get a starting role or just getting more minutes. I think that's going to be huge for him moving forward. That's kind of the expectation that I have out of all these names, to be honest with you. I don't know if Ralph has another name to throw out there or what he thinks about this Club World Cup. To me, it's going to be totally new, and I'm going to be following it day by day. It's going to be a really exciting competition because you got the best teams out there. But from the Paraguayans' point of it, I mean, we have a list of a lot of names, Ralph, but not most of them are important right now in their team.
Yeah, that's right. I think Lescano, like you threw out, is somebody that's interesting because he played so well in Libertad, but we haven't really seen him make that jump in Fluminense. And you're looking at another player that did make a jump in Brazil and is not there anymore, Mati Segovia, that is now at Alain. But I think Lescano was always a bit more of a complete player than Segovia, so there could be something interesting there. Alain's definitely the team to follow because we haven't mentioned Facundo Zavales there. He's on loan from Olympia for this tournament. And then they have Salomoni, who was also a left back in the Paraguayan Primera. He was in Guarani. They're obviously not Paraguayan players, but have played in the Paraguayan league. So I think Alain is going to be my team to follow in this tournament. I have no idea what it's going to be like. I think it's unclear if the European teams are actually going to take this seriously or they're taking it like it's a summer tournament, like a preseason kind of tournament. So that could determine a lot of how interesting some of these games can be. But I think for looking out for somebody like Lescano, because he might be your most natural replacement for, say, an Almiron or even a Galarza, but more an Almiron, because we didn't talk about what if Almiron gets injured. So Lescano has that left foot, but he also has that kind of attacking ability and ability to close players down. So that would be really interesting to watch. And if we're being realistic, I think it's only the South American teams that could really challenge any of the European teams in this kind of competition. I was saying to Roberto before before the podcast started, that in the previous format, the European teams have never lost to other confederations. They've only ever lost to CONMEBOL teams. So I don't know if we're going to get any huge surprises, or if we do, then it's probably because the European sides don't field their best 11s. But hey, you never know. Alain against Man City or Alain against Juventus. Maybe we'll see something crazy and Kaku makes a name for himself.
It's going to be really interesting to see what happens, as we always do here at Guarani Vision, covering that. Obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on everything that's been going on with the Paraguayans abroad and the Paraguayan teams, because obviously the Clausura is starting very soon as well. We got some transfers that I'm sure we're going to talk about in our next episode. The Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana games also coming up as well. So for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.